Hi guys, welcome to SnipBit, the podcast to show that you can be successful in your chosen field, whatever your background or start in life. Today, I'm absolutely excited to welcome David Bradham, former Formula One driver, multiple winner of the legendary 24-hour Le Mans race and sports car championships globally, and part of one of the most famous families and brands in motorsport. David, thank you so much for being a part of SnipBit.
Thanks, Haley. Yeah, great to have me on the show. I really appreciate it. And, you know, you're doing a great job with interviewing lots of great people to inspire people. So well done.
Thank you. I've been very, very blessed. So, David, in terms of what you've achieved, do you think your background and upbringing were a major factor in that?
That's a really good question because, you know, my upbringing was probably slightly different to what people perhaps thought it might be. You know, my dad was a 3 times Formula One world champion. He was extremely well known around the world, you know, in the sort of 60s and 70s. And he retired at the end of 70, and I was born here in the UK in 65. So in 1970, he retired and went to Australia. So I grew up in the land of Down Under. And of course, at that time, you know, Dad was probably one of the most famous people in Australia. So everywhere I went, people would be pointing, "Oh, that's Jack Brabham," or that would be Jack Brabham's son, or whatever. So that was my kind of world. But I was too young to really understand what Dad had done or achieved or anything like that. There were lots of trophies in the house, but they were objects. They didn't really mean anything to me. So I'd walk past all these trophies and there might be someone there standing in awe of looking at Grand Prix winning trophies, but they were like objects to me. I had a football, a soccer ball and a skateboard as a kid, and off I'd go and I'd be in my own kind of little world. And I never had any dreams of being a racing driver at all the way through schooling. Nothing. I didn't know much about racing. And it wasn't until I left school at 16 to go to a agricultural boarding school because we had a farm. So I was being groomed to be a farmer, not a racing driver, that is for sure. And it was only when I went to America to watch my older brother, Jeff, racing that I really saw racing for the first time. I saw a go-kart that somebody was working on in a workshop. I didn't even know people race go-karts. That's how far removed I was. But because I grew up on a farm, I loved driving fast on the farm, sideways, challenging myself. And that was the thing. I always loved to challenge myself. So whether it be in a farm vehicle, a motorbike, climbing up the top of the roof of the house, up the tallest tree, I was a bit of a thrill seeker, but I didn't have any thoughts at that time of being a racing driver. So when I saw the go-kart, I thought, hey, you know what? I'd like to have a go at that. And my father was a little bit against any of his sons going racing. You know, he went through a very, very dangerous period. He was one of the lucky ones to get through and not be killed. They were going to funerals all the time. You know, he lost very close friends. Bruce McLaren and Jochen Rindt died in 1970, and he called it quits after that. It was just, you know, it was enough. He was 44 and he was done. Mm-hmm. So he wasn't that keen and to push us into go-karts at an early age, where you see a lot of people do. So it's not what people think. You know, a lot of people think we would have been in a go-kart at the age of 4. You know, it just wasn't the case at all. We had to find something within ourselves to want to go racing. You know, Dad never pushed it, Mum never pushed it. And it was something we had to find. And all 3 brothers ended up going racing. So
in the genes.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously you're subjected to it in your environment, but it wasn't a passion. Speed was a passion. Racing, I didn't really think much about it as a kid.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because you see some people really pushing their kids to follow in their footsteps, but this was almost like the antithesis of that.
Totally. Yeah, totally. When I sat down, I've got a wonderful picture in my head of my father when I sat down with him saying, I'd like to have a go in a go-kart. It was the biggest shock of his life because I obviously up until then showed no interest in racing, and he thinking, yes, great. I'm the youngest. So my youngest son doesn't want to go racing. He wants to be the farmer. We've got a 4,500 acre farm in the middle of Australia. He needed someone in the family to look after it. So, you know, his dream was about to be smashed by me saying, I want to get a go-kart.
So who do you think has been the driving force behind your success if your dad wasn't keen for you to get into racing?
Me, basically. You know, when I look back, it was my dreams, my aspirations. I set myself targets. I wanted to achieve those targets. And, you know, I did, you know, you do. I mean, people can influence you, but at the end of the day, it's up to you to do it. And I think that's what Dad's philosophy was. He just sort of said, well, okay, there's the steering wheel, crack on and get on with it. You know, he wasn't someone that would pore over data. Not that we had data that back in those days like we have today, but he wouldn't be there at the track all the time trying to hold my hand all the way through. He just gave me the steering wheel and said, get on with it. You know, so it was very much I had to do it. And of course, you as a sort of growing up in a famous family of racing, the pressure could be higher than what it is normally, because you've got such high expectations of everybody around you. Oh, he's a Brabham, so he must be really good. I was lucky enough to be able to be good at what I did, but that's through hard work and effort as well as talent. But I had to prove myself. And that was part of the driving motivations for me, was always kind of, I have to prove myself. I have to push myself, you know, because where is my limit? I don't know really what my limit is. I think it's something just here, but actually when I get to that limit, I realize that limit's a little bit further down the road and it's not really a limit. So, you know, how far do I want to push the boundaries? And each time I go past those boundaries, I find there's more there. And I think that was a thing that I really quite enjoyed, was pushing those boundaries and seeing what's beyond them.
That's really interesting, actually, because I think there's probably more pressure on you because of the name than it would have been for an unknown.
Yeah, I think it has its pros and cons. You know, it opens doors. You know, people get excited by meeting you, which has its good things and it has its bad things, because they all just want to talk about you. So when you want to talk about them, they don't really want to talk about them. They want to talk about you. And then you have this battle with people about a conversation. But, you know, the pressures for sure were high. But, you know, I was who I was. I couldn't change who I was. So I had to try and maximize what was around me.
Yeah, 100%. So obviously you have a really strong growth mindset. How important do you think that has been in your career?
Well, I think if I didn't have it, I wouldn't have achieved what I've achieved, for sure. You know, like I said, that it's about looking at a goal, thinking that perhaps that's a boundary. There's boundaries all the way. There always is, you know, and those boundaries are either outside influences or things you put up inside your own mind that stop you. So then you've got to break that down and go, no, why is that stopping me? And then you push through again. And I think if I didn't have that and that desire and that passion to improve, that's the bigger mindset, isn't it? You know, it's about being bigger than what you think you are, and going for it. You know, because there are no real boundaries to life. You know, if you set your mind on something and you stay focused to it, and yes, you'll go left and you'll go right, you'll go up and you go down, but that's the path to get there.
Yeah.
We think we always want an easy path, but we've got to learn, we've got to grow, we've got to develop to be where we want to be in the future. So we have to go through that.
Definitely. So was there a point in your career when you thought, I know I'm going to be successful?
Well, I think there was always something inside me that felt like that. And of course, you work hard to be successful. And of course, yes, you have failures, that we all do. But those failures are there to help us grow and get to where we want to get to. So yeah, it's an interesting question.
Okay. So in all of your career, what is the biggest challenge you faced, and how have you overcome it?
Oh, we have lots of challenges, don't we, in our lives? I think one of the challenges I had was being comfortable with who I am,
Mm.
because I grew up in it. Like I said, that's Jack's son. That's Jack Bradham's son. It was never David Bradham. That's Jack's son. So you're living under the cloud of a legend. But who am I? And for me to feel comfortable in my own skin with who I was a challenge. And it took a while. As you get older, you have more life experiences, you learn and develop, and there comes a point where you start to be more comfortable with who you are. And then I think that breeds success in itself once you've let those kind of things go. And I think that's part of the thing. There's so many things we hold on about who we are. It's about letting go. And once you've let go of those, and you start to see the real you inside you, and that's very empowering as well. And I think that helps you to grow and make the progress that you want to do. I had a physical challenge back in '92. I'd been in Formula One in 1990. Then I went to sports cars in '91 with Jaguar. And then early '92, I lost the hearing in my right ear and then totally lost my balance. So I was at a meeting, or drove to a meeting up in Huntington, a place called Lola, who built race cars. And I just noticed when I was having the conversation that his voice was changing every time I moved my head. And then I got into the car and thought, right, something's not right. And I drove down the motorway, and a little voice popped into my head, and it said, "Don't move. Whatever you do not move." So I'm driving along the road going, okay, why is that voice telling me don't move?
Yeah.
And I knew I was losing the hearing. And so then I just popped my head down like that, and everything went like this in front of me.
Oh my goodness.
So my balance was completely gone. So I'm like, I've frozen, I'm not moving, and I drive all the way home. Got out, walked to the front door like a drunken person, because I just had no balance. I couldn't stay straight.
Yeah.
Anyway, I ended up in hospital. They said, look, you've got an ear infection. You should be good to go within 5 days. Now, the next day, I had a phone call from a Formula One team saying, look, we'd like you to come and do a test in Italy. And it was a team I was trying to get a test drive with, so it helped me get back into Formula One.
Yeah.
And I had to say, I can't drive. I just really can't drive because my balance, I've got an ear infection and my balance is gone. I said, well, okay, we'll come back to you at another time. And those 5 days passed, and the problem was still the same. And this Formula One team kept ringing up, and I kept saying I couldn't do it. And of course, then the pressure's starting to build. You feel like you're going to lose your career. Panic sets in, and so forth. And the next time they called me, I said, yeah, no, I'm good, I'm going. Even though there's no way I should ever have got into a race car. Because if I just did that with my head, everything would just go like this until it's settled.
Yeah.
So you can imagine how stiff a Formula One car is.
Yeah.
So as I'm driving, I couldn't even walk in a straight line to get into the car. But I had this thing inside me. I've got to keep pushing. Whatever my difficulties are, I do have to push myself and somehow find a way of getting through it.
Yeah.
And when I'm driving in the car, the bumps, the whole road in front of me is just bobbing up and down.
Wow.
I was okay in the fast stuff. Actually, I was quicker than the regular drivers in the fast corners. But when it came to hitting the brakes, you've got 3-4G under braking in those days, and so your head is being forced forward, and you're trying to bring it back, and the apex is bobbing up and down. So I can't actually get a proper visual of the apex.
Oh my goodness.
And in that year, I did my very first Le Mans 24 hours. I kept doing races. When I look back, I should never have been in a race car. But in today's world, you wouldn't get away with it. But back then you could. But I just felt I just couldn't give up. I'm not very good at giving up on stuff. And that was a massive challenge to get through from a physical and mental point of view.
So how long did it take you to be fully recovered from that?
I reckon it took, I mean, I went back to Formula One in 94. I still wasn't 100%. I think 95, 96, I started to think, okay, yeah, I'm there. And what was a really good test for me was actually riding a push bike with no hands.
Right.
So when I first started to get on a bike after it happened, I'd be cycling along and let my hands go, and my body would go like this to stay upright. Now, if I tried to do that now, I'd just fall over.
Yeah.
But it's how I felt I had to be to stay with no hands. And then over the years, I got straighter and straighter. And I went and saw lots of experts. I had, MRI scans. I had every test you could think of. No one could really tell me other than, you had an ear infection and your balance has gone. And one guy I saw said, look, you're probably going to get, your hearing is going to be 20% and your balance will readjust. And he was accurate, so I've got about 20% in my right ear and my balance just readjusted. So I have had no issues since then with balance. My balance is pretty good. But, that was a really tough period because you think your career's over. And if any little sound went off in my left ear, I started to panic.
Yeah.
Because that meant that this one was potentially going to go as well. So you've got this one that was at that time just stone deaf. And then any little feeling you had in your left ear set off a panic.
Mm.
So I was having these internal battles with myself all the way through it, as well as thinking, I've got to keep going. And, it was tough, it was a tough thing to sort of get through, but I didn't give up. I kept pushing, and yes, it was a disability, but I'm sure it didn't help my career in certain circumstances in the early stages, because perhaps if I did better, other opportunities would have come. But it was what it was, and it was, instead of giving up and thinking, oh, well, that's it, my career's gone, and not trying again, I went on to have a great career after that. So I can't complain.
No. But it must have been incredibly debilitating.
Well, it was at the time. And you really rely on, the people around you who support you, your family, your doctors, your support team as such, to help you get through it. They can only do so much, but at the end of the day, it's down to you. So it's how you view it. What's your attitude towards it? Do you believe that you can get through this? All these little things that we've all got them. We've all got attitude. We've all got belief, confidence. How much effort do we put into it? They're all sort of human tools we all have. It's just how we use them. So I was trying to use those tools to get through what I had to get through.
Amazing. So if you were stood in front of your teenage self now, what advice would you give yourself and why?
That's a good question. Really good question. If I think back as a teenager, I had a good upbringing. I went to a good school, but I struggled at school. So slightly dyslexic. My kids do, and my cousins, and so it's a bit in our family. So learning at school was difficult, but I was really good at sport. So I kind of excelled at sport, and it was a struggle to get through my education in the way that I could get through my sport, if you were making those kind of comparisons. Mm-hmm. So if I was kind of looking at myself back then, I'd say, look, you need to look at what you've achieved, because you never thought at that point you could ever really achieve that, particularly when you have moments And there will be a lot of people that will relate to this. You know, if you're struggling at school or whatever, it's very easy to put yourself down. I used to do that. I used to think I was not that smart. And, you know, I went through some real mental battles of myself at a certain period of time. And I would say, look, there is so much more potential in you than you realize. There really is. The world really is your oyster. You've just got to apply yourself, use the tools that you've been given, let go of any fears of failure. You've just got to push yourself, because life will make it happen for you. You know, there's only so much you can do, but life will do the rest. And have faith that life will put things into place for you. And that's something I kind of felt like I learned and took through to my racing, because I started to really focus on the mental side of the game in terms of my racing. So my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions, my words, my actions, the people around me, what the energy I was emitting, what the energy within my team was like. Was that going to be a successful outcome? You could kind of start to predict the outcomes by the energy in the team. Yeah. And I started to really focus more on that than my own driving. I actually became more successful because of it. And, you know, the visualization, the belief, the intent, you know, we don't talk enough about the power of intent. You know, so all these things, I go back when I was, say, in my younger years and perhaps say, look, intent is really powerful. You know, it's a force in nature. It makes things happen. You know, belief, as soon as you start doubting, life will give you a doubting world. You know, it's like, if I looked in the mirror, I think where I'm trying to get to is that when I was younger, I'd say, look in the mirror and look at who you are. Look at who you're being, because that's the most important, who you're being. Are you being a champion, or are you being a loser? Because if you're being a loser, you'll be a loser. Be a champion, and a championship's going to come your way. That's what I would say.
I think that's such a powerful thing. People don't realize that their words have such significance. Their
powerful.
Have such significance.
Yeah, I mean, thought. You know, thought is energy. It's powerful. It makes things happen. Words is a vibration. Vibrational energy makes things happen. And of course, those words can be positive or they can be negative, but they're going to create whatever they are. They're going to be creating equal to what those frequencies are. So you've got to be really careful, because we've got a very powerful mind that we really, really don't truly understand yet. And particularly when you're younger or you're surrounded in a negative environment, it's so easy to get bought into what other people think. And then you become them, which can be a massive mistake. You know, it's so important to be who you are and have your vision and your faith and your dreams, and you can make it happen.
That's really powerful. So, David, what do you want to be remembered for?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, that's up to other people to decide, I guess. You know, I believe in karma. I believe, you know, what you put out in life is what you'll get back. You know, I've had, you know, lots of people write to me or people I've spoken to, and I used to do a bit of motivational speaking. And as I said before the show, you know, I went to America. I raced over there for 12 years, absolutely had a fantastic time. And I was part of a group called Racers Who Care. Yeah. And we used to go to, you know, quite underprivileged schools, quite rough schools, and do an inspirational talk, because there's a lot of people in those environments. There'll be a certain way of looking at life. And a lot of those are outside influences that's around them. And it's really tough to see the light at the end of the tunnel when people are in that situation. So when you go in there and do a talk and you talk about your light, you know, I know that I have had really, really lovely letters and emails afterwards where someone's got inspired by what you've said. And if you've only inspired one person, you've done your job, as far as I'm concerned. And someone just to see the world a bit differently. And then they start to create that new world for themselves. All we've done is just tell them that exists. And here's my experience and my life story about that. And of course, someone's then got to sit there and go, yeah, you know what, I can do better. It's a choice.
Absolutely. And it's just showing them a new alternative, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. And unless you've got people prepared to sit in front of these people who are in a certain mindset, it's just helping to send a spark of inspiration to change that mindset, because until that mindset's changed, nothing's going to happen. So they have to make that change. Their free will is to make that change. It's whether they decide to make that change. And there's some fantastic inspirational stories where people have been in that environment. They're on the streets, they're in gangs, they're in whatever, and they one day decide, no, this is not for me. They're going to go somewhere else and do something, and they have a much better path. But they had to make that decision. And we have a free will of how we want to decide. It's just we've got to choose it, and then have the courage to think that there is a better way. And it doesn't matter which way you look in life, it's going to take you somewhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's no end to life. I mean, in a sense of, well, if I think this and I go to the shops, there's always something happening in front of me. Life's sort of pulling it all together, isn't it? Yeah, and then you have another choice, and then, you know what I mean? So there's an infinite amount of choices out there. What are you going to decide? That's the thing. Which way are you going to go? And sometimes you need that inspiration around you to make that little bit clearer in your mind and create that light.
Brilliant. So, David, what are you up to now, and where can we find you?
Well, when I was I'm 55 now. So when I was 40, I was in the prime of my career. And I started to think about the future 10 years down the road. So I was going to be 50, 10 years down the road when I was 40, thinking this, what am I going to do? Because I'm going to be too old and too slow. So I was always a paid professional driver. But when I got to 50, I thought, well, I'm going to be in the bin. No one's going to want me, so what am I going to do? And I just thought, well, you know what? We have this iconic racing name. Surely there's something we can do with it. It sits with Ferrari. It sits with McLaren. It's got 70 plus years of motorsport history and success. Formula One World Championships, Le Mans 24-hour victories. Me and my brother have won Le Mans. My dad was a 3 times world champion. Bradham's won Formula One Constructors Championships. There's so much there we should be able to do with it. And then I discovered that we didn't own the name properly.
Really?
No, somebody in Germany had registered Bradham and Bradham Racing. So when I started to look at it, I looked at trademarks and whatever and thought, well, there's a few gaps. And when I tried to do something with it, then we found out somebody else had owned the name. And that turned into a 7-year legal battle to get the name back under the family control.
Wow.
So I was trying to have a career, but I had this massive court case in the background as well. And it's when I won Le Mans in 2009 was the height of the court case. So that was another challenge to separate the negativity of a court case with trying to do your job on the track. And I was lucky enough to win the championship in America and Le Mans in the same year while all this stuff was going on in the background. So it was quite a distraction. And then Christmas Day 2012, we got the name back.
Brilliant.
So that was okay. Now I've got a clean sheet of paper. What do I do? How do I bring this name back? And we started to look around, but I kind of felt like it's an iconic racing name, but how do I turn it into a brand? There's quite a difference between a racing name and a brand. So my goal has always been to turn Bradham into something significant and a brand which has meaning, where people really understand it. And I did two projects. One was a crowdfunding campaign called Project Bradham, where we have a race team and we open up the doors a lot more. So a fan, driver, and engineer from around the world can get more access to what we're doing and provide a kind of educational element to what we're doing, not just a race team that has all its secrets, but this is opening up a lot more. And that crowdfunding campaign was successful, although it was only a small bit of money to get to where we really needed to get to. And then we ran into some difficulties because to raise that next bit of money was impossible. So we thought, well, okay, how are we going to do this? We had to think differently because we kept hitting brick walls all the time because people said, look, you're too early. When you've matured a bit more and you want more money, it's kind of how the investor world works. It's risk. People don't want to take too much risk. So, and I didn't ever have gone into the world of investments. I was a racing driver. I'd never gone into that world. So I was a duck out of the water. It was really challenging. Another big challenge for me, I guess. But yeah, I didn't give up. Anyway, sometimes you got to think differently, and then I thought about, well, maybe there's a project we could get the name out there that will then turn full circle where we could have a race team of that type. So I ended up meeting some people in Adelaide, Australia, and they were involved in manufacturing, lots of other business, a private equity group. And we decided that we would create an automotive company called Bradham Automotive. Mm-hmm. And we built what we call the Bradham BT62. So there are over 700 Bradhams built since 1962. And you have Bradham and Ron Turanak started, my dad and Ron Turanak started Bradham back in 62 to develop the Formula One team and be the biggest racing car manufacturer in the world in the 60s. Mm-hmm. And there was always BT and a number. And I drove Formula One for Bradham and I drove a BT 59.
Right.
And the BT 60 and 60B was the last one. 61 was designed but never built because the Formula One team collapsed. And then when I picked it all up only a couple of years ago, we launched the BT 62, which was a high performance track car. That's now evolved to a race car, the track car, and a road version of that track car. So we have three variants. Only 70 are being built. They're being built out of Adelaide, Australia, and we're now working on and hopefully be launching this year a new road car, a new supercar for the road. So that's the first real project that we've got up and running, and we ended up doing one race, which was in November 2019, which I managed to drive at Brands Hatch, and we won our first race. Really? So it was really cool. I was in a Brabham I was a Brabham driving a Brabham on Brabham Straight because at Brands Hatch it's called Brabham Straight. Yeah. And my dad had won at Brands Hatch in a Brabham Formula One car. So it was a beautiful kind of story. And then, when I think back of being in the middle of that court case, thinking, how the hell am I going to do this? To then standing on the podium at Brands Hatch, having won a race in our Brabham, and looking back at that journey, there's many times I look at say it's not necessarily about the prize, the trophy, it's the journey. Yeah. And I knew that also when I won Le Mans. I'd been there 16 times previously, and when I won Le Mans, it was like, it's actually all about the journey. It's not just about the trophy. And again, I've been on this journey outside of racing, going through the court case, trying to figure it out. And I ran out of money out of the court case. I had nothing left, penniless. That was it. How do I get to the next stage? And I just never gave up. And so now we have an automotive company. We're producing cars for customers. There's going to be one racing in the UK this year with a customer car, and things have developed. But if I'd given up back then when I was in the middle of the court case, where sometimes it didn't look that good, I would not be standing here telling you about what fantastic things we're doing now. So I think that's a great example of never giving up, keeping a dream in your head and sticking with it. Even though you've gone left, right, up and down. I went through terrible situations, but I got through it, and now we've got the brand out there, and we've got a great project. So that's been my life really since 2012.
Fantastic. It's just a real example of perseverance.
Yeah, one of the people that works with me, Claire, she said, "I think you've just rewritten what perseverance means." You know what I mean? So, yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll write a book about it one day. But it was quite interesting, quite a challenge. But like I said, could have easily given up. But like I said at the very beginning, I'm not good at giving up on things, and thank God, because look where we are today.
Brilliant. David, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Hayley. No, I really appreciate you having me on the show, and I hope my story, like the other great stories that you've heard on your show, inspires people to achieve.
I've no doubt about it.
Excellent.